So I talk about various different topics, mainly around ascension. My focus is generally around the energetic. So I talk a little bit about the Schumann resonance, space weather, based on my long journey of trying to understand the various different impacts that I was going through. I think it started around 2013, 14 for me, when I realized that there was something that was more external to my reality that was impacting me, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And then I started to look at things like solar flares and space weather, and starting to make the correlations between, excessive mental looping thoughts or emotional outbursts or, physical symptoms. And then obviously aspects of my own journey. But now I sort of write to, keep people in the loop and update them to give them some context around things that they may be going through to help them on their ascension path, essentially. And also I have another platform, which is only, it's a little bit younger. It's about 2.5 years. I've had New Earth Children, which is something that I was prompted to set up, and with the focus of talking about these new children coming onto the planet, and based around my own personal experience and what I do in my work and help support other people. So David, that was a real buzz to be able to sit down and speak with him and interview him, more just have a conversation. But I mean, David Icke, I stumbled across David Icke when I was growing up in high school, and yeah. So off the camera, I kind of made some jokes, and I was like, "Thank you for making me the crazy person in high school talking about, reptilians running the world." And he kind of laughed. So there's so much to my journey, and there's so many different elements, and I truly believe that a big part of my work is trying to bridge sort of the disclosure community, the galactic, ET community, and the spiritual community, because I feel like I have walked in both worlds my entire life. And, I've been I guess you could say I was one of those children who was quite awake and tapped in and tuned in. I realized that I had healing abilities at a very young age, and psychic abilities and things like that. The experience part comes in at a much later time, but it's one of those things that you have what I call those holy shit moments where your whole life turns upside down and you realize that the reality that you thought was real is something else. And then you look back over your life and you realize, wow, this has been going on so much longer than just that experience. It was just that one moment where it becomes conscious. And so I guess my conscious contact experiences started around the end of 2015. And that, that's just opened up a whole new world for me. And it's kind of really weird for me to talk about it now because it feels like it's such a long time ago. But it's still a journey that I'm on, and still very much a part of me. So if I go into some specifics, I had a very abrupt Kundalini awakening in 2015, which was catalyzed through a divine counterpart journey. And I'll kind of just make a side note here that, that journey it is quite public. People can go and find podcasts and things that I've spoken about that quite openly. That journey has taken many plot twists and changes, and it's at a very different space right now. So it's still all very relevant and relative to this journey that I'm on, but it's a lot has changed in my life over the last 2 years. So if I go back to 2015, after the Kundalini awakening, that was when I started to have my conscious contact experience with galactic beings. And it hit me very hard and very fast. And it really, it catalyzed my dark night of the soul, which went for pretty much the duration of 2016, because I couldn't make sense of what I was going through. And what happened was that I was having very intense dreams. I'm a really avid dreamer. It's been a big part of prophetic dreams all my life. And I was being shown these children that I would have, that I would physically, come into this world. And I couldn't make sense of it at the time because I wasn't planning to have children. It wasn't a part of my world. I had just ended a long-term relationship, and I was starting to plan a new life. And I guess some of the situations that happened, or experiences that happened, one night I started having what I would call interdimensional craft showing up. So I'd be out at a party, or I'd be somewhere, and it would always happen late at night. And I would see this, it's kind of like a fluorescent green shape crafts kind of spinning, and then would like float down. And I wasn't the only one that witnessed that. All the people that were with me saw that experience, but everyone kind of like turned and looked at me, and they were like, "What was that?" I was like, "I don't know." And they're like, "Well, that only happened since you arrived, so it's got to be connected to you somehow." And from there, I started having experiences at night where I could feel craft flying above my house, and it was terrifying. I didn't know what to make of it. And I know that what would happen generally, there would be that very typical, you hear often, feeling as though you're being watched, and then something occurs, and then a bright light in the room, and not remember anything. The next day, I have very little recall, to be honest, around being up aboard craft. I know when it happens. There's the signs that I know that happen in my physical body, and the kind of adverse reactions that I have upon waking. But it was around that time where I was intensely having dreams about these children, and at the same time I would wake up with scars and marks on my body. And so there was something that was indicating that there was something going on, and I couldn't really make sense of it at that time. So just to fast track a little bit around that continued for months. And I have a lot of very highly intuitive people in my life. I always have been surrounded by, psychics and healers and things like that. And a lot of people kept saying to me, "Oh, you're pregnant, you're pregnant." I said, "Oh, no, not possible," And so I went through, around that time, what I call a interdimensional conception, where I merged with another person's energy essence. There was no physical contact involved. Although that person was present, the next morning I woke up and I had that same feeling that something had happened that I didn't understand. And I knew that my body had changed. And I think the sign that really indicated to me the most that something had happened was that, being an energetic healer, and that's what I've done for many, many years, there was something different in my energy. When I was working on people, I was having this very high, almost like a rainbow energy that was like emanating through my work. And that was probably the first sign that showed me that something had happened. So it took me a little while to kind of understand, and I was being given and shown a lot of references around that time to Immaculate Conception, and being shown that was indeed what I was experiencing. And you can imagine the cognitive dissonance around that. I was never raised religious. That's not something that's ever been on my radar. But when I look back, I realized it was the only frame of reference that I had initially. So I was starting to go through those symptoms, pregnancy symptoms, but most prevalent to me was like the energetic expansion that I was feeling in my womb. And so I started researching, trying to understand what was happening to me. And during that phase of the dark night of the soul, I went through and I researched as much as I possibly could. I started to research about hybrid children, and I came across Bridget Nielsen at the time, I think.
Nice. He's awesome.
She was one of the first who started talking about that publicly, I think.
Yeah.
At least she's one of the first ones who made some waves, you know.
Yeah.
I'm sure other people were talking about it, but
yeah. So when I found her, I was like, oh my God, that that's it. It started to give me some context around what I was experiencing. And I thought that I'd sort of found the answers. And then I realized that in the hybrid programs, a lot of these women don't actually give birth. And I was like, well, I feel that this journey for me is to go through and to give birth. So I had to keep seeking. And then, stumbling across, it's a very 3D term, but there's a lot of people that talk about cryptic pregnancy. It's sort of not an area that I dabble in because it's very dense and very confusing. Basically, in essence, it's a longer gestation period of women who feel that they're pregnant and it doesn't show up on any medical examinations.
you have all the symptoms and stuff. Yeah.
So that was another aspect, but I was probably more focused on the fact of interdimensional conception when I found there was very, very limited information back then to describe what I was going through. And when I found information around that, I think it was in a book by Drunvalo Melchizedek. It was just in one chapter. And when I read that was the thing that resonated with me the most.
Was it the Flower of Life book?
Yeah, volume 2.
Yeah, they talk about that in the first one. Actually, that's what these like Lemurians were actually doing. They were teaching people how to conceive without actually having intercourse, and they were practicing this and teaching it to their society. So it's a real thing.
Yeah. So it was, and just to backtrack, I have a very strong connection to Lemuria. I always have. And in the lead up to what I call the point of conception for me, I was waking up and I was like being given like these messages. Sometimes I do. I have a voice that kind of speaks to me in the morning. And it was telling me to look at Lemuria. So all of the seeds were planted for me. I just had to decode it and work out and understand it. So, so, just to fast track, I guess, from that point, I had to then understand from, the research perspective, and I dabbled into every rabbit hole you could possibly imagine. Ancient Aliens, I found one episode on there that was really helpful, and I was just taking in as much data as I could, and then I realized I got to a point where I could no longer take on information and data. I had to go within to really understand my own individual journey and what I was going through and experiencing. So I guess this goes through what I've tuned into my own body through this experience, and also like I work with a lot of women who are going through various different similar experiences, and quite often what I see is when I tune into their sacral or their womb, I can see, and some people talk about that there's a chakra, a womb chakra that sits at the back of the body, which sits somewhere between the sacral and the solar plexus. And it's almost like a portal that allows the soul to come in when a woman has conceived. That's just in very sort of physical terms, what I would classify as a 3D pregnancy. But what I see with women who are bringing in higher frequency children, it's almost like a direct link or portal from other star systems for these children to enter into that space. And, I probably need to share and make it clear at this point that this process that started in the end of 2015 or in the beginning of 2016 for me is still an ongoing process. My body changes. It still holds, the energy and sometimes the physical manifestation of these children yet to be born. And what I see in that process is that because these children are coming from such a higher density, if you will, it's a big process for them to come into physical density. And it's like they will sort of come in and go out, and there was this process. So it's really interesting to see the individual experiences and read people's energy field in their body to access and gain information to understand this process better. That's why I talk about it as an interdimensional pregnancy process, because it really is morphing from one dimension to another, and trying to, I guess, come down into physical form. It was one of those prophetic dreams that I had a couple of years ago, where I was walking. I call it a new earth dream, because I know it's like in the future. It's that high definition color and light, and I was walking and talking with my daughter, who was probably about 14 at the time. And I was talking to her and asking her questions. I guess I became lucid in that experience. And I was kind of just saying to her, do you know how you were conceived? And to her, it was like so natural and normal. It was an energetic merging process that took place. And I looked at her and I said, do you know that nobody believed me at that time? Like, do you know how hard that was? You know, as your parents do, you know, back in my day kind of thing. And and I said to her, do you remember your time in the womb? And she screwed her face up at me and she said, I didn't like it very much.
Mm-hmm.
And
really?
Yeah. You know, a lot of people ask me this, and I don't talk about it a lot these days because it's still a process that I'm in, and I don't have all the answers, and I'm not at the end of it. But this process that began many years ago is still ongoing. You know, I still feel, I still have all the physical symptoms of pregnancy. I look quite pregnant physically, so I'm always keeping the camera. To be honest, I always keep the camera, you know, so there's no full shot. It's hard to navigate 3D existence while going through this process. And for the duration of this has made me much more highly sensitive to energies, more so than I ever was before. So, you know, going through the tumultuous changes that are happening on the planet, you know, I have to keep my energy very clear, very clean. And you know, I let go of timelines and time frames. I realize that there's a divine timing. I truly believe that when I talk about this, I talk about it to help other women who are also going through this process, to help them heal and understand. But I do believe that there's certain components that need to come into play in order for this process to be completed. And one of them is that the frequency of the planet needs to be at a certain stabilization of a higher frequency so these children can be born. It won't happen before then. And I think that's just going back to the bridging of the spiritual and the you know, disclosure community. I had a very vivid dream in the beginning that showed me a timeline of when that will come into actuality, and the the various components of that was that there was a burst of light that hit the planet, so you could look at that as like a solar flash or the event or a wave of light I saw, and I didn't know anything about that back then.
Mm-hmm.
So when Alison Coe came out with her information, it was almost identical to what I'd seen in that dream, and it gave me hope. There was that component. I also saw at that time that there was massive changes happening on a financial level. There was a restructure of the financial system and governance systems. As far as I can gather at this point, I don't believe that I am in the programs as such, although I do have direct access to viewing through my dream space. I'm highly active in my dream space, like very regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that's been ongoing for many years. And I think it started to really come into light for me around the end of last year. I think I came across secret space program information probably around 2016. And I knew, when you hear something and you hear a piece of information and it resonates, and then you're like, I don't know what to do with it, I'm just going to park it.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like that over the last couple of years. And it was back in, and that's why I'm so grateful for you guys, and I love the work that you do, because the more people that share stories, the more you can start to piece together your own journey and things start to make sense. And I had an experience where I woke up with a lot of very specific information around a 20 and back, but not my own. From my own personal experience, I can honestly say that I go through phases where I go what I call being really tapped out. And I know that I'm highly active on some sort of a mission, but these are temporary. So it's not like a 20 and back. It might happen over a space of a week, a fortnight, maybe a month. And just to explain what that's like for me is that I'll be very active in my dreams, and I know that I'm out in space or off planet on some sort of a mission. Generally, it's a cleanup mission. And when I come into awake time, like when I wake up in the morning, I feel like I'm a diluted version of myself. The cues that I have that I know that I'm not here, and the way that I understand it is that a high level of my consciousness is not in my physical body. I know that there's more of me out there doing something else. I mean, the most recent experience that I had that I can remember was probably a few months ago, where it was very specific around Mars and what was happening. And I think I reached out to you at the time, Tyler, because I really didn't know who to talk to or go to. I mean, I have a lot of great people in my life, but when it comes to SSP stuff, I don't have a lot of people that I can talk to. At that time, I felt like I had a session with Rebecca Rose at that time, because I was going through, how does she call it? I was going through a moment of crisis, and I was trying, I think the things that I was seeing on Mars at that time was so way out there that I really needed to check my own sanity. I needed to make sure that I wasn't completely losing and going crazy. And I was seeing operations being cleaned up, but I was also seeing clones being killed. Oh. And this is clones of people who I am connected with on a deep soul level. And that was quite traumatic for me to witness that. And I had been taken up around that time in front of a council of galactic beings, and they were telling me about the completion of a very specific involvement in the SSP in relation to me and someone that I'm closely connected with. And at that time, that basically they were saying that the contract has ended and that the fragmented aspects of the soul were coming back online to that person in their human body, and that a healing process would begin, and I was to help facilitate that process, which is something that I do in my work. So I guess it was a heads up for me. And it's funny, as I speak about that now, I haven't had a lot of those experiences since then. So maybe there is a part of me that is connected to that I'm yet to explore and unpack. So the information was basically how they do the age regression process, and how, I guess, similar to what I was just explaining to you, how you go through that phase of not really being incorporated or integrated and feeling tapped out. And basically showing me what a person's life is like while they're coexisting through various programs, and what that looks like on a human level. And it was about a couple of months after that I was at my parents' house, and I walked in and my dad was watching your show back in January. Yeah. And it was Tony. And it was in that moment that I walked in that what he was describing in his own experience was exactly the information that I'd got in that download when I was waking up a few months prior. So I just kind of was like, whoa, okay. So I sat down and I started watching, and I was like, hey, Dad, what's this? And he's like, oh, it's a SSP testimony. I was like, oh, okay. So I started watching it. And I guess it was at that point that I started to really start to pay attention to the information that was coming through to me at that time. And so that was one component to it. So when I say this is relatively new within the last 12 months for me. I had started writing a very lengthy article around counterparts, and I guess to help people better understand their own divine counterpart journey. And I was kind of making categories. I mean, I don't like to box things, but like to compartmentalize for the human to understand, especially in the work that I do. And I kept getting this like name, galactic counterpart. And I was like, it was something that I'd sort of dabbled in over the years of working with various different clients on a divine counterpart journey, seeing that some have earth human, soul journey together, and then some have a totally different frequency, and some very specifically have a soul connection from off planet. And so for me, just to compartmentalize, and I was trying to write that article, and I had writer's block, and I had this little voice said, go watch Journey to Truth. And I was like,
I hope everybody has that voice.
I hope so too. And I clicked on, and you guys were doing a live Q&A, I think with Tony and Rebecca and
Johan,
yeah. That changed everything for me, because I clicked on that and I came in late, and at the moment I clicked on it, he was talking about, or you guys were talking about divine counterparts in the SSP, and
no way.
Yeah, Johan was talking about how they actually take these kids and put them together in the programs, and they basically raise them together, and they do all their training together. So when they finally meet as an adult, there's this soul recognition there that they don't remember from the childhood programs. And that would make a lot of sense for some people listening to this.
Yeah. So after I listened to that, there was so many such specific details that I could relate to. And at that point in my entire work, it had never even crossed my mind about, counterparts being used in the programs. And it makes complete sense to me, when it was delivered in that way. Of course, when people share such a strong connection and they can feel and experience and witness what the other is in any moment, it makes sense. And I think there were things that Johan said that triggered a lot of memories of conversations that I'd had, over the years with a certain person. And it was at that moment, it was like the things that I had parked over many, many years sort of came into crystal clear vision for me to understand things a lot better. The things that hadn't made sense to me. I'll be honest, it was something that I never really wanted to delve into, because there's so much hype around it, and there's so much disinformation. And, I've heard people use the term, PSYOP and things like that.
The twin flame PSYOP,
yeah. And I would agree with that. I think that was the hesitancy that made me want to do this work and talk about this topic, because you get all types, and I think that was one of the reasons that I wrote that really long article to talk about it, because I always come back to two components that I think is the most important in terms of soul connection is to understand the origins and the purpose. And when you can look at that, then you can, work within your own ascension process to, regardless of what is happening in the physical, if you can work in understanding like the origins of what your soul has gone through together, where it comes from, what, let's say, what sort of karmic implications you may have brought forth together to work out and learn and evolve through. And then also looking at what the purpose is, because a lot of the times there is a greater soul mission that is to be birthed through, two people coming together, especially when they hold a higher frequency. And that in itself is, the game-changing component. And I think that that's why counterparts are so important on the planet at this time, because they do bring in that frequency of unconditional love that is beyond space and time, and transcends what we understand on a human level of love.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be heartbreaking and tragic. And so every journey is very unique and different. And I have seen some beautiful things. I've experienced some beautiful things. And I've also seen some really horrendous, interference and all, dark and light in this sort of community. New Earth is here already. You can feel and see and tap into that, through your own vibration and frequency. But I guess what we're striving for and working towards is for all of humanity to be able to be in that frequency and experience it. I think my work with New Earth children is that I think that for people like myself and women going through this journey, where as a part of that process, we're really anchoring in new frequencies to not only birth children, but birth new energies to help Gaia herself go through her rebirth and ascension process. I think that's why I love a lot of the work through BQH sessions, especially with Alice and Co and things like that. I can say almost I love how in sync I am with her, because quite often I'll see things through my dreams or through sessions, and then she'll post a video, within a few days or a week, and it's almost word for word verbatim, like what I've experienced. So, but I think that it is, going back to talking about Lemuria and the ancient ways returning, my process of, interdimensional conception and pregnancy and birth is just one of the components of new way of being and new ways that are coming through that aren't new at all. They're actually ancient, that they've existed on this planet when we were vibrating in a higher frequency. And I think we're returning back to some of those aspects, maybe not all of them. I don't think that all those civilizations that were in a higher vibration on Earth were perfect. They had their flaws. So it's like a refining process of what have we learned through the dark ages and the dissension process, and how we can take the best of, higher civilizations and bring it back to where we're heading as humanity itself. And definitely there's a lot of components of our star brothers and sisters that are assisting this process through us, or we are those aspects embodied on the planet to make that come into a physical manifestation. So I guess that's a very general way of speaking about it, but I guess through I've been challenged so much on this path, especially in the last 5 years. And I think a lot of people can relate to the challenges that we go through, personal hardship on various levels. But I think one thing that always pulls me through and guides me through is the visions and the dreams that I've had about New Earth, and knowing that that is a reality that we're moving towards. And that's why we go through some of the darker phases and the hardships, is because, each person's experience when we go through, deep clearing of ancestral trauma, or deep clearing of past life wounding, or whatever it is that is in our own process to be cleared and neutralized, we make waves within the collective field, and we all work as one entity in some regard to restore the balance. I spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff.
Mhm.
And I think initially it was very much around an event or a solar flash and something happening very instantaneously. Not that I don't think that is off the potential playbook. I think that is a possibility. But I'm kind of in a space of being in the unfolding and also seeing how it plays out. I think that there is also that option of the split, and you can feel that. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've felt that for years, the literal splitting of moving into one frequency bandwidth and another. I remember a couple of years ago being in a very heightened state. And I remember I was like looking out on the forest that sits in front of my house, and I was literally seeing reality as New Earth in front of my physically in front of my eyes, that like real pristine, crystalline, everything glistening, high definition color. Like I was being able to see through the veil and see into that reality, New Earth reality. And so, I truly believe that it is access to us all when we're in those heightened states. But the actual key to it all is that we have to implement it and ground it into physical. It's not just when we're vibrating high, we can all have those, way out experiences, but it's about integrating into the physical so that it's and accessible for everyone. And I think the timelines change, to be honest. You see the trends, the event, solar flash, timeline splitting, and it's like we all collectively link into the trends as one of the timelines is most predominant in that moment. Then something happens, like, the global situation of the last 18 months.
Yeah.
It changes the timeline again. And I love to go in and kind of like access a lot of information of like the most current timeline that we're on and where where we're heading as humanity and how it's going to unfold. I've seen multiple possibilities over the years. Probably for months now, I have been what I call very human, which is very foreign to me, especially over the last years where I felt very more galactic than I have felt human, and normally I resist that. I don't like it. I like to have sort of the multidimensional experiences, but it's been very grounded, very solidified, I guess is another word. And one morning I was outside just drinking coffee, just pondering and wondering why I was going through this phase. And what came back to me was, this is not a phase. This is kind of get used to it because it's going to be here for a while. It's not going away anytime soon. And I think the real focus has been on the physical body, preparing the physical body. And I have woken up probably a handful of times between now and then. So in the last 2 months, hearing that you're being prepared for the solar flash, your body's being physically prepared and upgraded to be able to take in the light of the solar flash. Now, when I say that, I take that with a grain of salt. I take any message with a grain of salt, because I know how influx things can be. But one thing that I also feel is that I don't think everyone will go through it and experience it in the same way or at the same time. One of the BQH sessions that I had a couple of years ago showed me that I was in a space living in a different home. My children were already here in physical, had been born, and I was experiencing what we would consider the event. And when, how they probe around and ask questions, and they were like, is this and I was like, this is the second event. Like, this is the second flash. The first one's already come and gone. And in that space, I was aware of it and experiencing it, but the people around me were asleep. When I say asleep, like literally physically asleep, they did not know what had taken place. I mean, so that's another possibility too. Depending on people's energy and consciousness, they're going to experience that differently.
I was listening to somebody, can't think of his name, but he said like every black hole on the other side of every black hole is a star in another universe.
Mm-hmm.
which makes that star a portal, and that's exactly what's happening with our sun. And people are like, well, it's too hot. And he's like, well, that's the whole psyop. Our sun isn't hot; it's cold fusion. It's light and gas. He said it's like, imagine one of those balls that you put your hand on and it has the electricity. He said that's basically what the inside of our sun looks like. It's electric. It's a cold fusion.
Electric.
And that's why, like, it's cold in space. The higher you get off the surface of the Earth, even in our own atmosphere, it gets colder. Why is it only
getting hotter? Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Why is it only getting hot? Why is it only hot on the surface? And he explained that's because of the light reflecting off the surface on our atmosphere. Basically, our atmosphere is what creates the heat.
Yeah.
Without the atmosphere, it's cold. That's what, and he said, he went on to say that like Mars has an atmosphere still. Whatever they tell you, it's a lie. He's like, there's definitely
Mars and the moon both do.
Yeah.
So, yep.
And then he said the moon is a space station that was brought here. But it's really interesting to think about that type of stuff. And he said it's hard not to find, if you're really researching in the right places, it's hard not to find what look like ships coming through our sun. On there's so many photographs and footage even of that. So whenever we think of this solar flash, it's like, it might mean, but obviously there's some radiation involved, and that's something that actually has to be considered, but it's not what we think. The sun isn't even what we think it is.
A couple of months ago, when I was highly active in my dream space, one of them I do recall as you're talking, and it makes so much sense to me, was I actually went to the sun to get a sample. It was almost like a test tube of plasma, and it was electricity like, and it was kind of blue. And that was kind of weird for me, because you would think that if I was taking a sample from the sun, it would look white or, yellow, and it was not. It was kind of a blue shade, and it was kind of electric. And I can't tell you any more details. I have no idea what that was about, but generally my focus is on what I call energy alignment. So during my conscious contact back in 2015, I've been doing hands-on healing since I was a kid, and then it sort of progressed. I learned and studied different modalities, but every time I was like, oh, why am I here? I kind of know this, and over 10 years, I started following what I was being intuitively guided to do, which kind of worked better. And I can see the progression of it over 10 years. It built up to this techniques that I use now. And I was downloaded at that time. That was when I heard during the sessions, you're now channeling the Arcturian ray. And I had absolutely no idea what that was. So I would tell the clients, and they'd be like, what's that? I'm like, I have no idea. But that coincided with all the things that I discussed earlier in the interview. And so I work with what I would consider very much I work a lot with Arcturian energy. That is like one of my primary kind of galactic components or aspects. I do a wide range of things. So I can read, I can soul read, I can read into people's energy field and their memories. So I normally go in and access a lot of information that is relative to them at this time in their soul's path. But I do energetic adjustments, psychic surgeries, things like that. It's growing and developing all the time, which is really kind of cool. I love the work that I do. What has kind of, I feel that I attract the clients that obviously resonate with me, but generally people, like you were saying before, show up in my reality when there's a shared experience there. That's just how it works.
You attract them. You attract them, or you hunt them down like you did me. You're like, hey, listen, bro, you gotta do a session. Something's coming through. Yeah.
Yeah, occasionally I'll get that, and I try and ignore it, but it like haunts me for days, and I know that won't go away. And I know there's always a reason for that, so I just trust. But yeah, I mean, since the SSP thing has opened the door in my life, I find that I'm starting to attract a lot of people who are bringing back their memories and starting to unpack that and helping people through that process of soul retrieval, so on a galactic level. There's a process that I do that is like called soul or star mapping, where I can kind of read into the field of different components of them and help embed that, almost like a soul retrieval.
Well, and you also, what you did for me was you removed a blockage. You removed the blockage that something was stopping me from remembering. And if you remember, I don't know if you remember.
I don't remember.
Yeah. So something was removed, and you told me like usually within 3 to 5 days or something after that, people you start to get memories back. And I was kind of waiting for it to happen. Nothing happened. Then as soon as I forgot about it, I did in fact have what I could only describe as a memory coming back of being on Mars. And I've actually never shared this one publicly. The only person I've told about it was Tony Rodriguez. And when I told him, his eyes lit up and he's like, dude, I've seen that basically.
Really?
He's like, you're describing exactly what it looks like there. And he was like, we need to talk more. And that's how we ended up talking. But yeah, so, and then that was it though. It was like a one-time hit and I never got, I have had some stuff since then, but that one just seemed like it was like right on time with what you said. It was interesting. So there's also that you offer.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that I do remember, your working your energy was so fascinating. And I think the one thing that I remember, because I do this, there's a lot of different techniques and tools that I work with. One is called consciousness rewiring. So it's sort of like I go into the neural pathways in the brain and look at where there's blockages and things like that. And when I went, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but when I went in and I was going to do that process on you, that was where I could see energetic layers of screen memory. And that was when I said to you, do I have permission to try? And I don't know if I can do it, but I'll try to be able to remove some of the screen memory, because I know as experiences, that's a lot of the things that we have to contend with, is having different memories implanted that aren't the actual memory of what was occurring. So, I haven't done anything like that since, but I can kind of get the sense of that.
Yeah, well, I thought that was like something you did all the time. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. Like it was so natural when you did it.
I always say that working on a person is so individual. So it's never one session is the same. And I guess I just have the confidence now that I can, work with the guidance of my team, but also the people that I'm working with and what is in the highest best good for them. And I know that a lot of these memories can be ultimately very traumatic for someone. And if someone's not ready to unpack and process it, I know that there's kind of like a safeguard. It doesn't matter what I do, it's not going to happen if that person's not ready or if it's not in their highest good. So what I love is that people can come and tell me the weirdest out there stories and I never bat an eyelid because of my own journey and how out there it has been. So, people can tell me pretty much anything. And obviously, I have my level of discernment and truth and, listening to, is that a trauma-based, perception, or is that, actuality and things like that. But I mean, yeah. So, I mean, I do primarily energy work and like psychic work. In a session, I guess that's what people can expect. But my background is vast and varied. I'm a qualified holistic counselor. I was a regressionist for many years. So there's a lot of components that I've done throughout my life that's kind of fused and melded. Yeah, what I do now.
Yeah. And you're right. You're right also about the screen memories where you were talking about earlier. That's a real thing. Like some people will go into a hypnosis and they'll keep going back to this one memory and they'll think that happened. And that's something that we have to come to the reality that this might actually be a screen memory blocking the real experience. Yeah. And I mean, even the movie Total Recall kind of touches on that. I mean, you sign up for it and they give you all these fake memories of a time on another planet or whatever else. And the whole plot is that he actually did spend time on Mars, but then they were trying to give him these screen memories and whatever, something along those lines.
I have to go and watch that because that's the third time this week someone's made reference to that.
Like his wife and job, and that was all fake, and then he realized it and freaked out. Yeah.
So basically, he had spent time in the programs on Mars, And then he came back to Earth, and they tried to cover it up by giving him these screen memories of this fake life. They gave him a wife here, a home, and a memory of a lifetime here on Earth. So he had thought all this was real when his wife was actually was just some agent working for this company to keep him from remembering what he actually did on Mars.
Yeah.
So then he goes to this Total Recall place where you're supposed to, it's like they offer vacations. Like you can get this, you can actually have memories of being somewhere else, and it seems so real. You felt like you were there. And I'll just let you watch the movie, but it's really,
that is on my to-do list this week.
It's total disclosure of the SSP or age regression type of stuff. And then there's a remake in 2012, Total Recall. I recommend watching both of them. Yeah.
Okay. Put them both on my, thank you.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start wrapping it up. This was incredible. Thank you. We touched everything. Yeah,
we did.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. Do you have anything coming up that you want to share with us before we go?
No, not at this stage. Nothing specific, but I hope that this conversation has helped someone out there. And I think that it's as hard as it is sharing personal stories. I really encourage people to find the bravery to come out and talk openly when they feel compelled to, and overcome fears and things like that, because I know that in my process of speaking publicly about these things has really changed my world in beautiful ways. And the way that I have been received from what my mind or ego wanted to tell me of, like, people will discredit you and ridicule you and all that sort of stuff. My experience has been very, very different since I came out publicly in 2018 and talked about some of these things. And it doesn't matter what your journey is like. It's all very individual, but it all comes together in the one process of where we're all heading as, human race into New Earth. And I think the more that people share and open and transparent, it helps us all heal and put the pieces of the puzzle together.
A lot of this information has been kept sort of locked up or kept undercover because of the invasion of the Smithsonian group way back in the 1880s.
What actually happens is it's not taken to preserve it, it's taken to hide it.
And about 4.5 miles from here, a cave was discovered. It's not really a cave as such, it's a man-made cavern system.
But how the hell do you get that much granite? Because the granite on the base of that damn near weighs what the dirt on the top of it weighs. Nobody knows what's underneath it. I've heard a theory that there's a spaceship underneath it.
There was copper and steel-plated artifacts that depicted men in armor with shields and helmets.
Including right here at Cahokia, there were reported 2 giants with double rows of teeth and 6 fingers and 6 toes.
Extra vertebrae or extra ribs in their cage. These are different races of people. They're not just regular humans.
Definitely is a stone burial chamber, and there's a large body in it, bones. I would say 15 to 16 feet.
I saw different types of extraterrestrials here with the Native Americans.
The peoples of the Cahokia Mounds actually saw the Birdman as some kind of cosmic being and not a humanoid being.
So this Birdman was the last and the pure and the true of his kind.
So yes, there were rituals, or there were dances and celebrations, and people would dress up like the galactic beings that were visiting. But there were actual physical galactic beings that were visiting.